All right, so moving on to the final segment, we're going to pivot over here to the world of college football, and I'll be sharing my college football week one summary of the biggest games and the biggest headlines that happened week one in college football. So I actually want to say, whoever cooked up the schedule for week one in college football, they did not disappoint. I mean, it was really a memorable weekend for college football for Labor Day weekend, and there's a lot to cover. So we'll start off with the first game of the reigning defending champs in Ohio State. They defeated Texas by a score of 14-7. My thoughts on the game. I was wrong. I picked Texas, and I give credit to how Ohio State played. But I'm very concerned about how Arch Manning played in this game against Ohio State. I think he was overwhelmed, and that hostile atmosphere got to him. Remember, this was his first road start in his college football career thus far. And I think the moment was just too big for him. He was 0 for 5 on passes, 5 yards or more in the first three quarters. That's alarming. That's very alarming if you're a Texas Longhorns fan. And he couldn't connect on throws. I was very surprised how inaccurate Arch Manning was throwing the football. And at times I felt like he held the ball too long in the pocket, trying to make some magic happen down the field. He couldn't connect on points in the red zone. And his best throw came late in the fourth quarter where he threw that deep ball to his receiver. But it's not all Arch Manning how this game played out for Texas and only scoring 7 points. Steve Sarkisian, head coach for Texas, I think he's the blame here too. He's an offensive-minded coach. I mean, I think his coaching needs to be talked about just as much as Arch Manning's performance for this loss. I felt like he was protecting Arch Manning rather than coaching him in this ball game. If that makes sense to you guys, because instead of letting Arch Manning play his game, there were 10 red zone plays that they couldn't cash in on, and there was 11 total points left on the board in this game. I felt like Arch Manning should have ran the football more, being a dual threat quarterback. I touched up on that last week in my game predictions for you guys and a game plan for Texas to win that game. But we got to give Ohio State some credit here. They played well on the defensive side of the ball. Matt Patricia deserves a lot of credit for how he played, game planned this team, for this Texas Longhorns team. And they looked great on the defensive side of football. They might have one of the best defenses in the country, hands down. And Ohio State, I think they played conservative on purpose for Julian Sayin. For anybody that thinks he's not ready for this level, I think they played conservative on purpose because why turn the football over? Why give away the game if your defense is doing what they need to do and you're not turning over the ball on offense? So I think for Ohio State and Texas moving forward, these are probably going to be the best defense that they play all year long until these two teams get to the playoffs. I still think both of these teams are going to make the playoffs, but as I take a sip of my Starbucks, but I give Ohio State a lot of credit here. Again, I thought Julian Sayin was going to be the one that was overwhelmed in this moment, but instead it was Arch Manning at the quarterback position for Texas that was overwhelmed. But I like the victory for Ohio State. Next game, you had LSU defeat Clemson on the road by a score of 17-10, an upset victory. I was shocked that LSU won an opener. I was wrong, and I give LSU a lot of credit. They have not won an opener in week one since 2020 in week one. And they had a huge second half, scored 14 unanswered points. They shut out Clemson in the second half. And Cade Klubnik for Clemson didn't play his best game at the quarterback position. I mean, he went 19 for 38 passing, 230 passing yards, 1 interception. Couldn't cash in on that possible game-tying drive that could have sent the game into overtime for the Tigers. Both Tigers teams to match up with each other in overtime. But I thought this was a good game, and this was a statement win for LSU. They have their quarterback, Garrett Nussmeier. They've upgraded the receiver room. The defense is well, and they're ready to compete in the SEC conference again. I think they're going to make a run. I think they're going to be a playoff team this year. Brian Kelly should be very proud of going on the road, playing against Dabo Swinney's program, picking up a big Labor Day weekend victory against the Clemson Tigers, who were a top 5 team at the time. I think they were ranked 4th in the country. So that's very impressive for LSU to get this victory on the road against Clemson. Ooh, this one, another upset. Florida State steamrolling Alabama by a score of 31-17. Now, that was not on my bingo cards for Florida State to dominate Alabama the way that they did. I'm sorry, Florida State. I didn't know what you were capable of. I wasn't familiar with your game. But Florida State went 2-10 last year, and they just beat Alabama at home. That is wild. And shout out to quarterback for Florida State, Tommy, who said that they were going to beat Alabama at home. And I wasn't believing in him. But Florida State had their way against Alabama. They could not stop the run. They gave up 230 rushing yards in the trenches. Alabama was outmatched all across the board in this game. You would have thought Florida State was the ranked team. You would have thought that Florida State was the SEC team rather than Alabama. You would have thought that it was Alabama that were the underdogs, the way they were playing. And I'm not sure what the hell the game plan was offensively for Kalen DeBoer. Having Ryan Williams, the second best wide receiver in the country behind Jeremiah Smith, have him line up in the slot for 90% of his offensive plays. That doesn't make sense to me. He's an outside receiver. And Ty Simpson, I don't think he's the answer at the quarterback position. I think they got a problem there. But the culture of Alabama has changed. And since Kalen DeBoer has been there, he's a good coach. But I don't know if he's SEC material. They have lost to 4 unranked opponents since Kalen DeBoer has been the head coach. He's only been there for 2 years. That's a culture problem. And I know Nick Saban, it's hard to fill in his shoes. But if you honestly think about it, Nick Saban lost to 4 unranked teams his whole entire tenure at Alabama. I think this is a culture problem right now that Alabama has run to. Time will tell if Kalen DeBoer is that true leader that Alabama needs. Because if not, they could be in a world of trouble for the next couple of years. And I can't remember the last time Alabama was ranked 21st in the country. One more loss like that, they're not going to be ranked, and they're going to miss the college football playoffs again. But this is a different time in college football. I guess we got to adapt to the fact that Nick Saban is not there to save the day for Alabama. But I'm just shocked they lost against Florida State the way that they did. And I know the score was 31-17, but if you're not stat watching, you're not watching that scoreboard, that game didn't really feel like a 31-17 game. That game really felt like a 31-7 victory in favor of Florida State, the way they decimated and dominated Alabama for that game. Next game, you had the Miami Hurricanes defeat Notre Dame by a score of 27-24. This is actually one of the best games, if not the best game, for Labor Day weekend amongst ranked teams. This was actually the first top 10 win that the Miami Hurricanes have had in nearly 8 years. So it was well-deserved, defeating the runner-ups of last year in college football in Notre Dame. But this game in Miami, they played at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, the Miami Dolphins Stadium. This had an old school vibe to it for this game. I mean, it was a physical game, and they were really getting at each other in the trenches. Both teams were offensive line and defensive line. So this was really good old school football fundamentals if you're if you're a fan of how games are decided in the trenches. And shout out to CJ Daniels having that catch for Miami, that one-handed grab, basically being surrounded around 3 defenders, catching it in the end zone, catching the ball and then falling into the end zone. I think that's already in the conversation for being the best catch of college football. And we're only in week 1, but that was a really good touchdown catch that he had in the second quarter, that one-handed grab. But I was actually impressed by both quarterbacks here. I really was. CJ Carr, I really wasn't familiar with him from Notre Dame getting his first start. He looked pretty good. I know he's been a part of the program for a couple of years. Had to wait his turn because Riley Leonard was the starter there last year, so he looked pretty good. And Carson Beck making his debut for Alabama. A lot of people thought he could have been a high draft pick last year around this time for the 2025 NFL draft, but his game actually declined at Georgia, and he actually transferred to Miami, taking Cam Ward's spot. Cam Ward was the first overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. I'm sorry, guys. This Starbucks is really good. But if possible, I would really like to see a rematch between Notre Dame and Miami in the playoffs. I think both teams are caliber teams to get there. Miami could actually be in the running for winning the ACC conference this year, depending on how things play out. So I want to see this rematch, but I think this was the best game amongst ranked teams in college football this weekend. And we'll talk about 1 or 2 unranked programs, but this was the Monday night game on Monday Night Football. Let's talk about the fact that TCU dominated North Carolina by a score of 48-14. Now, I'm not going to be the one to panic on Bill Belichick just yet. This man is the greatest NFL head coach of all time. This was his first college game as a head coach, guys. Let's give him a break. Plus, it's not like he's at an SEC school. He basically took North Carolina, that was basically at the bottom in the ACC. And anybody that was expecting this program to be a competitive team that early, no, that's not going to happen. Or for Bill Belichick to get that type of rub that he had, or for Bill Belichick getting that type of rub that Deion Sanders had when he got to Colorado, that's not happening either. Colorado actually had some good players. Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, and others there. So Bill Belichick has nothing at North Carolina right now. But after the first drive, they actually couldn't adapt. And I think it was wild that Skip Bayless said that after that first drive that North Carolina had a national championship caliber offense. We were literally in the first drive of the game, Skip. But even ESPN even noted that the quarterback, I don't know his first name, but Lopez for North Carolina did not complete another pass for nearly 2.5 hours, which was crazy. And we got to give Bill some time here, because anybody in college football that would have a total of 70 new players a part of the program, it's not like the NFL where you're getting preseason games. Like, you guys are getting, after the spring ball, you're only practicing, scrimmaging amongst each other, and then you put it on the field. So you don't know what to really expect with 70 new players. And TCU is actually a really good football team in the Big 12 conference. They're not scrubs. They went 9-4 last year. Winning nine games in college football is actually outstanding achievement for some. And TCU is actually, looking at North Carolina's schedule, they're actually the second hardest team that North Carolina is going to play all year long. They got to play against Clemson at some point in the season. But everybody else, like, there's nothing else that really screams, oh, BTA again for North Carolina. So it's going to take them some time to figure it out. They'll probably be good enough to win 4 to 6 games this year. 4 to 6 games is their ceiling with 70 new players, and still trying to figure out how you're going to run the team offensively, defensively. So I think we should give Bill Belichick a big break, but they did get spanked on primetime football on Labor Day night against TCU. But that is my college football week 1 summary of the biggest headlines and games that transpired. And that is all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. This is your host, Thomas Tyree, signing off. And I'll see you guys on next week's episode.